Panting heavily, she ran to the bookstore. The glass doors of the store were closed, and the roll-up door was half pulled down. Jianxing paused for a moment and then ran over in a somewhat flustered manner. She peeked inside through the gap in the door, sweat beading on her forehead. "Hello, is anyone there?" she shouted. The next second, a lazy voice echoed from behind her. "Yes." Startled, Jianxing whirled around and saw a man sitting in a concealed spot by the flower bed. A cigarette dangled from his mouth. The man's face was obscured, and Jianxing could only make out a hint of his burning cigarette. But even with his distinct hairstyle, Jianxing recognized him. He was that unruly cashier. Sure enough, Zhang Bishan recognized Jianxing too. There was no doubt on his face, as if Jianxing's appearance was to be expected. He stared at Jianxing and said unclearly, "Here to borrow a book?" Jianxing dodged his gaze guiltily, her throat dry. After a few seconds, she nodded in acknowledgement. "Help yourself at the counter, remember to sign out," he advised. Jianxing immediately laughed and nodded energetically. "Okay, thank you." She then quickly pushed the door open and went inside the bookstore. Not long after, she emerged carrying a book. Before she left, Jianxing hesitated but still waved goodbye. "I'm going now, thank you." Zhang Bishan stood in the doorway, still looking as lazy as ever. As a greeting, he lifted his chin in Jianxing's direction. Watching Jianxing's figure become progressively more distant, Zhang Bishan looked in the direction she left and sneered, "Kid." The book was thick, with a black cover. It felt great to the touch. Carrying it, Jianxing thought she could feel the warmth of Xu Zhengqing's hands. She blushed involuntarily. At that moment, the bell indicating the end of school rang at her high school. Jianxing looked up and saw the LED scrolling time on the school gate, 10:40. Her sister, Jianru, would be home soon, so she quickened her pace. But as soon as she stepped out of the school gate, she saw two familiar figures. It was Jianru and Lu Cheng. Taken aback, Jianxing hadn't expected to see them there. She had always thought they spent their time near the second school. Perhaps because she was the first to leave the school, all the vendors at the gate glanced over. Jianru was no exception. She clearly paused when she saw Jianxing. Lu Cheng's face showed clear evasion and discomfort, which stopped Jianxing from approaching them. From a distance, Jianxing locked eyes with Jianru. They did not speak, and Jianru didn't make any gestures, but in an instant, Jianxing understood Jianru's intentions. She paused, withdrawing her glance somewhat stiffly, then walked past Jianru's stand without a second look. About 10 minutes later, she arrived at the busiest park in the city during the daytime. By then night had fallen, a crescent moon hanging overhead. The river beside her was calm, only disturbed occasionally by a wild cat crossing the bridge. No trace remained but the sway of their body. Across from the park was the city's other key high school, which should have let out earlier. Only a handful of figures remained. Looking down the long People's Road, Jianxing suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. She stood under a street lamp, bathed in a warm yellow light that graced her shoulders. The shattered light and shadows couldn't penetrate her gaze. Upon returning home, Jianxing went straight to take a bath. The tons of homework commonplace in a span of a semester had not yet started rearing its head, so she took this opportunity to go through the content for the following day of each subject. As she was about to finish, she heard some noises outside. A car drove into her yard amid the subtle footfall sounds, and then the noise of water emanating from the bathroom ensued. The door to the adjoining room was promptly opened and closed. Just as she anticipated, Jianru didn't initiate a conversation with her. In front of the desk lamp, not long after she had settled to reading English words, Jianxing found herself closing the book at hand. She looked over to the corner of the table where 1984 was placed. She felt like an enormous rock was pressing on her chest. Though she had planned to read a couple of pages tonight, right now, she wanted to hide it. In a matter of moments, Jianxing carefully put the book into the drawer. The desk lamp was turned off synchronously with the water going quiet in the bathroom. Twisting around on her bed, before another round of water sounds came on, she eventually drifted off into a half-conscious state. Out of nowhere, a light cut through her vision. It wasn't the raw brightness of an incandescent bulb, but rather the sanguine glow of an evening sun. The heavy smell of disinfectant pervaded the room, and she noticed the fluctuating room temperature. One minute it was as cold as a freezer, the next as hot as a kiln. She grimaced in agony. Struggling to open her eyes, she only saw a lengthy corridor with an all-white elegance that ended on a rouge hue. In the juxtaposition of the red and the white, she spotted Jianru covering her mouth in front of a young couple, her tears gushing as if they could form a river. As soon as the couple turned around and left, Jianxing saw Jianru wiping her tears hurriedly. Within seconds, her facial expression seemed to sport a smirk of ridicule, or maybe contempt. She tossed her head around and their eyes met unexpectedly. Jianxing. Someone waved hands in her line of vision and she jolted back to reality. She turned around to reply to Zulu's puzzled gaze. "Wah, what happened?" Zulu queried. "What is with you? You seem so absent-minded." "I might have not slept well," Jianxing replied, getting a guidebook out of the drawer and handing it to Zulu. "Wow, you got it." Zulu reached for the book without even taking off her backpack. "No, borrowed it." Jianxing leaned over from the Xinhua bookstore. "Didn't know they have this kind of books," said Zulu as she flipped the cover open. The first page had scribbled a few stylized characters. She strained her eyes to read Zhang. "Zhang what now?" "Zhang Baishen, I think," Jianxing responded. "Oh yeah, Zhang Baishen." Zulu showed little interest and kept flipping through the pages. By the time the self-study session concluded, due to this book, many rows of students were distracted. When Zulu managed to submit her sticky note of target, she finally heaved a sigh of relief, asking Jianxing if she wanted to go to the restroom, but Jianxing responded, "I will just go to the back and throw some trash." As Jianxing walked past Chenxi nervously stuffed a sticky note into her hands. "Shit, I need to go to the restroom. Can you help me take this to the office?" Without waiting for her response, Chenxi grabbed some papers and ran off. With no other options, Jianxing turned around and left through the back door. The office of Xu Zhengqing was on the same floor as the classrooms near the boys' restroom. When Jianxing arrived, she found the door ajar and the 4 homeroom teachers from this floor sitting and chatting. Xu Zhengqing, holding a cup of tea, was the first to see Jianxing approach and leaned forward. "What's up?" Jianxing made her way over. "Our class's target volunteer." "Where is Chenxi? He is so good at using people." Jianxing replied, "He went to the restroom." Lazy people always have the most errands. Xu Zhengqing made this comment in front of a girl with no tact. All Jianxing could do was give a polite smile, pretending she didn't hear it. Xu Zhengqing finally told her where to place the sticky note and added, "Oh right, that family background survey, tell Chenxi to collect it by tomorrow." So it was due tomorrow. Jianxing was under the impression there were a few days left. She sighed inwardly, assured Xu Zhengqing that she would deliver the message and turned to leave. As she was heading out, she happened to catch a glimpse of a paper airplane that was kept inside Xu Zhengqing's desk. She stopped, staring at the paper plane, seemingly stubborn and lost in thought. Xu Zhengqing didn't understand Jianxing very well, but in his impression, she was a restrained child. He was stunned for a moment, followed Jianxing's gaze to the side of his desk, and saw the paper airplane. He couldn't quite believe that a girl, or rather a high school student, would like this kind of thing, and he looked at Jianxing again, then at the paper airplane. After repeating the action twice, he tentatively picked up the paper airplane and asked Jianxing, "Do you like this?" Jianxing reacted abruptly, meeting Xu Zhengqing's picky gaze. Xu Zhengqing's eyes were full of doubt, scrutiny, and observation. Jianxing had no time to avoid it, feeling a scalp-tingling sensation. "Do you like it?" Xu Zhengqing asked again. Jianxing wanted to answer, but she choked. She liked it. But where was she just attracted to this paper airplane? Thinking about it, Jianxing bowed her head. All along, she never answered. Xu Zhengqing naturally couldn't understand her complex emotions. He thought the girl was too shy to speak, so he laughed and said, "I picked this up in the park last night. I don't know which little brat threw it. I originally wanted to give it to my son to play with, but then I recalled that my son graduated from college this year, and he probably wouldn't like to play with this. Maybe he would even make fun of me. So, not giving it to him anymore, I'll give it to you." Jianxing pursed her lips and took it. She looked at the paper airplane in her hand, feeling a bit desolate and also a sense of inexplicable loss and recovery. Despite the fact that the paper airplane was not hers, she was a bit secretly happy and guilty, because this episode of Missed and Regained Ownership reminded her of the experiences of the protagonists in countless idol dramas. She grew up never daring to think she was the main character in life, but at this moment her male lead was Xu Zhengqing. They had a special bond. This specialness was probably enough to make her remember this entire youth. After leaving the office, Jianxing took a deep breath. She didn't hurry back to class, Instead, she went to stand by the railing. Being high up always allowed you to touch more wind. Looking up, the sky was close. Looking down, the ground was wide. It seemed like you could overlook half the city at a glance. As a person, only when standing on high grounds can you have more freedom. And climbing to high places takes time. When Jianxing looked at the crowd in the square, the countdown to the college entrance exam surfaced in her mind. Suddenly, there was a trace flying across her visual field. It was a paper airplane. Jianxing's eyes tightened, and she turned around sharply. It turned out to be Xu Zhengqing. Jianxing was a bit shocked. She looked around and almost thought she had come to the wrong floor. "Why are you here?" "I am here to talk to Xu Zhengqing about something," Xu Zhengqing asked. "What are you doing here?" "Just looking around," Jianxing said. "Are you taking a break?" Xu Zhengqing laughed. "That's too much, isn't it? The school term has just started, right?" Jianxing smiled and said, "Just taking a look." She turned her head back to look at the paper airplane that had landed on the ground below. Xu Zhengqing showed off. "Did it fly very far?" "It'll be far away when you pick it up later." Jianxing poured cold water on him. Xu Zhengqing was speechless. "Don't be a killjoy. This is my treasure. Whoever picks it up is lucky. My paper airplane folding skills are top-notch. Even Xu Zhengqing can't beat me. Some people, just their names alone, can disturb one's peace of mind." Jianxing's eyes flickered. She asked Xu Zhengqing casually, "Is this what you guys compete about?" "Yeah," Xu Zhengqing also lay down. "What else can we compete about? Study? We're not even in the same grade." Jianxing went, "Oh." She didn't want to end this topic and pretended to ask hurriedly, "So how did you guys meet?" Xu Zhengqing, who always had a straight tongue, asked instead, "How did I meet you?" Jianxing gave him a glance. "Do you want to talk about it?" Xu Zhengqing laughed first. "Forget it, it's embarrassing." While speaking, he turned his body sideways, rested his arm on the guardrail, glanced at what Jianxing was holding, and raised his eyebrows. "What's that?" "You're also folding this kind of thing." He reached out to snatch it. "Give it to me. Let me see how far it can fly." Jianxing immediately stepped back, her body language clearly defensive. Xu Zhengqing paused. "What's wrong?" Jianxing slowed down before reacting, her expression a bit awkward. Xu Zhengqing saw her embarrassment and generously helped her save face. "What, afraid you can't compete with me?" All right, let's leave your dignity intact." Jianxing tugged at the corner of her lips. She wasn't embarrassed because she rejected Xu Zhengqing, but because the reason behind her actions made her feel ashamed. At the edge of the cliff, only a little bit away, she dared not think, if Xu Zhengqing pressed for an answer, what she would say. "Because it's given by the teacher, so I can't lose it." "Impossible." Because this might be the one folded by Xu Zhengqing. She wanted it. Why did she want it? Because she had outrageous thoughts about him. Perhaps for Xu Zhengqing, this was entirely normal. After all, everyone knew that the queue of people who liked Xu Zhengqing could stretch from Sanchong to Minzong. It should now be possible to queue from Hezong to Yizhong and then to Erzong. It seemed like the whole world could like him, as if the whole world wanted to stand by his side. Just not her. Because she's a thief, doomed to a life skulking in the shadows. She doesn't deserve him. She wouldn't dare to deserve him. Before the class bell rang, Xu Zhengqing and Jianxing waved goodbye. Jianxing stood outside the door for a while before entering the classroom. On her way to her seat, she informed Chen Shi about the form issue. As soon as she sat down, Zulu asked her, "Where have you been?" While asking, her eyes slid towards the window. She must have already seen Xu Zhengqing. Jianxing initially had no plans to hide anything and truthfully said, "I helped Chen Shi deliver the volunteer post to the office. I just met a friend at the door and we chatted for a bit." Zulu went, "Was the class advisor in the office?" Jianxing answered, "Yes." Zulu said, "Oh," and after a few seconds asked again, "So what did you guys talk about?" Jianxing paused while flipping through her book. Then, without lifting her head, she said, "What could we have talked about?" Oh, Zulu looked at Jianxing again and didn't continue to ask. At noon, when school let out, Zulu asked Jianxing, "Jianxing, are you going home?" Jianxing replied, "Yes." Zulu hesitated for a moment, "But everyone else is not going home. It seems like they are just eating around school and then coming back to the classroom to study." Indeed, there were such students, but most of them either rented their own accommodation or lived in the school, so their time and funds were flexible. Jianxing didn't have all these. "I have to go back," she stated. Well, all right then, Zulu acknowledged. Be careful on the road. At midday it was still hot. By the time Jianxing reached home, her t-shirt was wet. Jianru and Lavicheng were not at home. Her grandmother had just finished cooking and came out of the kitchen. Seeing her, she smilingly said, "You're back? Quickly wash your hands and eat." Jianxing walked towards her room. "All right, I'll be right out." Once she entered her room and closed the door, she sat in front of her desk, placing her hands on the table's surface, aimlessly digging at her nails for a few moments. During the process, her fingertips were noticeably shaking. She squeezed her knuckles hard, and only after the two crisp sounds did she stretch out her fingers. The room was very quiet. She seemed to hear the beating of her heart. It was heavy and fast, making it somewhat difficult for her to breathe. Just as her grandmother was urging her again, Jianxing replied with a strained voice, "Hey, all right, I'll be right out." After saying that, she pulled out the paper airplane from her pocket. The body of the plane was actually a bit long compared to her pocket, but it was protected without any damage. She held the airplane for a moment, then along the crease, she unfolded it. She remembered the way Xu Zhengqing picked up the papers. He took it from the top of a stack of volunteer post-its. He wouldn't casually take someone else's volunteer post-it to fold, so this should be his. A person who had barely left the top 3 ranks in his 3-year middle school life, how high would his college entrance exam goals be? Could she be admitted? While being deep in thoughts, Jianxing's action of disassembling paused. Holding on to a corner of it, a light layer, almost weightless, but she barely dared to breathe. "Jianxing," her grandmother called again. Jianxing rubbed the corner of the paper with her fingertip, and in one breath, she fully unfolded the paper plane. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening came from behind, followed by her grandmother entering. "What are you doing?" "Homework." As she spoke, she walked behind Jianxing, noticing the piece of paper in her hand. "What's this?" "A blank piece of paper. Why are there so many folds?" The heart, which was hanging for a whole morning, thumped back to its original place. Despite being back in its original place, Jianxing was wrapped in a surge of disappointment and frustration. Her vision was blurred for a moment, and her mind was dazed for a few seconds. In the short absence of mind, Jianxing thought about the emotional roller coaster since she got this paper airplane until now. Like a joke. Turns out not every encounter can withstand the weight of fate, nor does everyone could possess the luck of regaining what was lost. Moreover, she has never been a lucky person. Even the Xing fortune in her name was picked up. Her grandmother was still speaking. "What's the matter? Being bullied by your classmates? Did your classmate fold your paper?" "Nonsense." Jianxing chuckled, shaking her head. "No, I picked it up randomly." "Well, what's there to pick up just a piece of paper?" Her grandmother said, "Quickly come out and eat." Jianxing replied, "All right, I'll go wash my face." "Just wash your hands will do." Jianxing didn't look at her grandmother. She put down the paper, stood up and went out directly. The door was left open. The wind blew in, knocking the paper off the table. The underside of the folded paper had a faint line of regular script writing, "Flying." During mealtime, Grandma didn't eat either. She just stared at Jianxing. Jianxing served her some dishes. "Eat first, watch later." Grandma kept saying eat without actually touching her chopsticks, her eyes fixed on Jianxing. After a while, she noticed something off and asked, "Why are your eyes so red? Did the sun burn them?" Jianxing replied, "I got a bit sunburned." She had just washed her face, and water remained on her eyelashes, leaving a trace of wetness every time she blinked. Grandma suggested, "Why not use an umbrella? Many others are using them." "It's okay," Jianxing said. "Using an umbrella is troublesome." "Ah, you are quite rough for a young lady," Grandma remarked. She then asked, "How have you been since starting school? Are you tired?" "Not tired." Jianxing would always choose lighter topics when chatting with Grandma. Grandma chuckled, "You're just like your mother, never admitting to being tired no matter how hard it gets." Jianxing simply smiled and said nothing, stood up to pour some water. She poured a cup for Grandma too. When Grandma drank it and complained about the lack of taste, Jianxing remembered something and went to another room. When she came back by Grandma, she tossed a piece of sugar into her bowl. The sight of that made Grandma's face light up in a toothless grin. But Grandma's mouth was largely devoid of good teeth, and that was why Jianxing only dared to give her sugar surreptitiously. As a sweet tooth, Grandma hadn't paid much attention to her teeth when she was younger. Over time, problems crept in. Grandpa had passed away by the time the conditions manifested themselves, and the household had only the two women. Money was tight, so treating her dental issues became impossible. Perhaps out of guilt, Jianru was very strict about this and didn't even keep white sugar at home. Bie Cheng also took Jianru's words to heart. It was Jianxing who remembered to buy sugar for Grandma with her hard-earned money, though Jianxing also feared Jianru, mostly because of her strong-headedness and loud voice. But an old woman, how many more years of real eating would she be able to have? Hearing Grandma hum a happy tune, Jianxing held back a smile and asked, "Are you that happy?" "Yes, I am. It's because my precious granddaughter cares for me," Grandma replied. Jianxing said, "Then you should live longer, so you can enjoy my care more often." "Ah," Grandma sighed after taking another sip of sweetened water, "I'm old. Don't have many more years to live." In truth, Grandma wasn't that old, not yet 70. But a hard life in her younger years had caused various ailments to catch up with her. How much longer could the main part hold if all the components were giving out? "Don't talk nonsense," Jianxing warned. "Mom will scold you if she hears." "Do you think I'm scared of her?" Grandma retorted, "And besides, I'm just an old woman. If she scolds me, she scolds me. I hope she can scold you less." Jianxing fell silent. Grandma hesitated a little before saying, "Jianxing, your mom really loves you. When you were young and in the countryside, she always wanted to bring you along wherever she went. There was a period when your health wasn't good, and she, despite her skepticism, went to see a fortune teller. She even had your name changed to a lucky one. Your dad too. When you were just born, he would leave the construction site and came home more than 10 times during the morning. Others teased him for being unsophisticated, but he didn't mind and kept his smile." Jianxing had heard this story from Grandma many times already, so she responded, "I know." "As long as you know," Grandma became relieved. "If she tells you something, don't take it to heart. She just doesn't want you to lose your way. She regrets not having a good education when she was young and now puts her hopes on you." Jianxing simply responded, Ever since their quarrel during dinner a few days ago, Jianxing and Jianru hadn't spoken. Grandma was probably worried. When two people were in a cold war, one would have to be the first to speak up. Between them, it was clear that Jianru wouldn't be the one to do so. So it had to be her. But even if Grandma hadn't told her, she would have approached Jianru tonight. After all, the form needed to be signed. Jianxing thought that Jianru would return home around 11 as usual. However, when he arrived home in the evening, he found that the three-wheeled vehicle had been parked in the yard for a long time. Jianxing glanced at his room. The lights were on, and there was a shadow flickering at the desk by the window. Jianru usually used this as a judgment whether she was doing her homework or not. Jianxing stared at it for a while, but didn't go in. It's mainly because it's useless to go in. If things were good, Jianru would say a few neither heavy nor light words and leave. If things were bad, she would have to carry the heavy word filial piety and listen to Jianru's nagging about those headaches. Maybe she even had to drag the neighbors over in the middle of the night to act as referees. After all, this was her usual trick. Suddenly, the tree shadow above his head flickered, and the shadow under the pale moonlight was like the wings of a machine that was gliding quickly. Jianxing paused, suddenly remembered something, and rushed into his room the next second. Jianru didn't know what she was looking for at the desk. The movement of Jianxing pushing the door was heavy, fast, and sudden. Jianru was clearly startled, stared at Jianxing for a few seconds before recovering her strength. "Are you going to die? Are there dogs chasing you, or is there treasure hiding in the room?" Jianxing pursed his lips, quickly glanced at the assembled bookshelf on the desk, and a white paper in the corner was clearly pulled out. The fatigue of the whole day swept over again. Jianxing lowered his eyes, walked a few steps to put his school bag on the chair, and found a form for Jianru. The teacher asked the parents to sign. Jianru felt guilty. Jianxing gave her a way out. She immediately took it, took the form, glanced at it roughly, and signed her name quickly. Before Jianguxing left, Jianru also went to school for a few years, and her grades were said to be good, so she has been very unwilling for so many years. After signing the word, she casually grabbed a notebook, wrote an English word, and asked Jianxing, "What does this mean?" Jianxing glanced at it. "Flying," she said, "flying." Jianru slapped her arm as soon as she heard, and shouted, "Where to fly? Where will you fly? You still fly? Your hair hasn't grown yet and you want to fly? You couldn't fly in junior high school. Do you think you can fly away in high school now?" Jianxing was caught off guard by this anger and didn't react at all. Jianru never held back when she started to do it. One slap made Jianxing's half arm numb. She reacted and asked Jianru, "What are you doing?" "What am I doing? You have the face to ask me what am I doing?" Jianru directly pushed down the books on the bookshelf. The desk was suddenly a mess. Jianxing subconsciously wanted to catch the white paper, but Jianru slapped her hand. She yelled, "Take it. I see you dare to take it." When the yell was over, she grabbed the white paper, patted it hard on the table, and asked by pointing at a word on the paper, "Say, where are you going to fly? You really don't study hard. Me and your dad, your grandma, who isn't working hard for you, supporting you to move to the city, supporting you to go to junior high school, and now you want to fly? Why don't you die? Why don't you take the whole family to die together?" She became more and more angry as she spoke, and from her expression, it seemed that the next slap would land on Jianxing's face. Jianxing had been lowering his head the whole time. She could feel the splash of Jianru's saliva on her face, but she just didn't want to raise her head, didn't want to see Jianru's face. She stared at the white paper under Jianru's hand in a daze. She had no intention, she was just dazing. But this behavior in Jianru's eyes was a silent resistance. She was so angry that she directly tore it up. Jianxing opened her eyes at this moment. "Mom, don't call me." Jianru threw all the torn paper. "What is this? Say. If you don't say anything, no one will sleep tonight." "What happened? What happened?" "It was Lu Cheng. He didn't come in, he just asked at the door." "It's none of your business. Go back to your sleep." Jianru yelled with her throat. Grandma seemed to get up too. Jianxing seemed to hear her voice faintly, saying something about discussing matters the next day. Don't delay Jianxing's sleep. She has been tired all day. Indeed, she was tired. Tired to death. It was late, and Jianxing also wanted to go to sleep. She closed her eyes and started to speak in a low voice. It was given by the teacher. The answer was unexpected. Jianru even thought she had heard wrong. She widened her eyes. "What?" Jianxing said, "It was our homeroom teacher who picked up the paper plane and gave it to me. The letters may have been written by him." Jianxing spoke without any signs of lying, so for a moment Jianru didn't know whether to believe her or not. She looked at the scraps of paper on the floor, then thought of the word fly. After a while she asked a bit harshly, "What does fly mean?" "I don't know," said Jianxing. "Maybe he hopes I will be successful in the future." She did it on purpose. Purposely said it that way. When Jianru was younger, she only made it through primary school, so she had a blind worship and respect for middle and high school teachers. Now that she had personally torn up the paper note that the teacher had sent to her daughter with high hopes, she must not have been feeling very well. At that time, her grandmother called from outside the door, Jianru, Jianru, go to sleep." Okay, stop rushing me. What's wrong with high school students staying up late? She'll have to stay up late in the future anyway," Jianru said while already making a gesture to leave. Before she turned around, she paused, looked at Jianxing, and said less sharply, "Anyhow, it was given by the teacher, so make sure you fix it and clean up before you go to sleep." This was Jianru's way of apologizing, just as Jianxing expected. In situations like this, Jianru allowed her not to respond, but Jianxing still said, "Okay, sure." After Jianru left, the room quieted down. Jianxing stood beside the table, staring at the scraps of paper on the floor, and slowly squatted down to pick them up, piece by piece. Jianru was always thorough when she did things. She wouldn't tear things into too many small pieces. It didn't take long to glue everything back together. To prevent the paper from being damaged, Jianxing specifically used wide clear tape to seal the entire paper. It felt slippery to the touch, just like it hadn't been damaged at all. But now that there was this protective film, she could no longer feel the residual warmth and scent of the paper. It felt like bottled-up obsessions and self-deceiving comfort. In a while, there was a knock on the room door. Jianxing put the paper in the drawer and turned around to see Bie Siwei come in. Ever since Bie Siwei had become lame, he had been carefully restrained and subtly unnatural when he looked at Jianxing. Of course, Jianxing could feel it, but she seemed to have emotional defects. Even though she wanted to make changes, she couldn't display any overtly intimate behavior and could only ask indifferently, "What's up?" Bie Siwei placed a 5-yuan note on her desk with a smile. "Sleep early, don't stay up late, you've been tired all day. This is from your mom, buy a drink when you're thirsty tomorrow." This was Jianru's usual way of apologizing. Jianxing glanced at the money and said, "Okay. Hey, so go to bed early then." Lavi Cheng didn't say anything more and turned around and left. Watching his hunched waist and stumbling walk at such a young age, Jianxing felt a soreness in her nose. She took the initiative to say, "Dad, you should go to sleep as well." Lavi Cheng was taken aback. He quickly turned around and said, Okay, go to bed early, go to bed early." He was saying this while backing away, accidentally hit the door frame, and awkwardly smiled. Just as Jianxing was about to stand up, Lavi Cheng raised his hand. "Okay then, sleep early." The door slowly closed. Lavi Cheng's silhouette in the door gap gradually faded. People often say that a father is like a mountain, but in Jianxing's memory, her father was like a crumbling boulder on the corner of a mountain. He had never been strong, he was just her father. The room once again fell into silence. It was so quiet that it was as if there had never been any sound of breathing, not to mention the turmoil that had just happened. Jianxing sat on the chair, her fingers rhythmically picking at the pull ring on the drawer. The small crisp sound like a hammer hitting a nail landed in her heart one click at a time. After a while, she gently opened the drawer and took out the book 1984. It was a foreign literature book. The content was difficult to understand, and its deep meaning eluded her. Sprinkled throughout the text were some notes. She wasn't very familiar with the handwriting. Without much patience, she flipped to the end. At the end, behind the author's postscript, was a time signature in black pen, 09.8.31 Yu Hezong. Jianxing rubbed her fingertips against the signature and wrote 10 more characters after it. "Wishing you the vast universe, an eternal journey." That night, the light in Jianxing's room stayed on until a.m. The wind started to blow around a.m., and by 5:10 a.m., Jianxing saw the first light of dawn breaking. To make pain effective, one must dare to drive the needle into the heart. Jianxing must have stuck it into Jianru, so much so that Jianru didn't directly talk to Jianxing on the third or fourth day, always seeming busy. When she was busy, Jianxing wouldn't actively look for her. After eating lunch, she would return to her room for a nap, and after returning home in the evening, she would directly go to her own room and not come out. To save on electricity, only one table lamp was allowed to be on in Jianxing's room at night. She sat at the desk, turning pages of the university application guide one by one. What caught her eyes were all universities specializing in aerospace. In just 2 days, Jianxing almost memorized the cities and admission scores of all the key aerospace universities in the country. Each of them to her seemed as unreachable as the blue sky itself. Actually, she knew the sky had no borders, had no concrete concept. As long as you are willing to lift your hand, lift your head, or look up, the sky can be right in front of your eyes. But the sun too had no borders and was large, yet it never shined on her. Under the faint light and shadow, Jianxing cast down her eyes, rubbing repeatedly with her fingertip on the name of the highest-ranked institution. After a while, she reluctantly closed the book. It was past midnight, and Jianxing was not sleepy, so she opened the drawer and took out 1984. Just 2 days had passed, and she had already flipped through nearly a third of the book. In fact, she was finding it very difficult to read, but she was in a hurry because there was not enough time. There was a calendar on the table. Jianxing thought about the date she had written down casually when registering the 7th. It was the solar term of white dew. The heat of summer was finally leaving. The yin energy of heaven and earth was rising and spreading. The weather was gradually cooling down, and the morning dew was getting heavier. This was the 3rd solar term of autumn. It was the 2nd solar term since she went to Xu Zhengqing's side. On Monday the 7th, Jianxing went to school early in the morning with her books. By the time she arrived at school, it was not even 6 o'clock yet, so the bookstore couldn't possibly be open. Although Jianxing thought this, she still headed towards the bookstore with an attempt to try her luck. Unexpectedly, the door was actually open. Perhaps because of the fresh morning breeze, the glass door of the bookstore was open. Jianxing peeked inside. Seeing no one, she hesitated at the door, unsure of whether to go in or not. Suddenly, a lazy yawn sounded behind her, followed by a good morning. Jianxing turned around in surprise, her eyes involuntarily widened. Zhang Bishan wanted to laugh at her reaction, but he restrained himself. Instead, he stared at her with wide eyes. Jianxing. He was mimicking her. Coming to realization, Jianxing retracted her surprised expression, appearing speechless. Zhang Bishan had 2 notable traits, yawning and laziness. He He was exhausted from staring wide-eyed without drinking a single drop of water early in the morning. Therefore, at the third second, his eyelids returned to their lax state. He looked at Jianxing and asked, returning a book? Jianxing merely responded with hum, without saying much else. Zhang Bishan could naturally tell that Jianxing didn't seem too keen on having a conversation with him, so he chuckled before bypassing Jianxing to enter the bookstore. Jianxing silently followed behind. The first thing Jianxing took out was the exam guide. Zhang Bishan was leaning against the counter drinking water. When he glanced at the book, casually picked it up, flipping through it. Then, as Jianxing was about to pick up a pen to check off a box, he asked, thinking about going to an aerospace university? The moment the pen tip touched the paper, it uncontrollably scratched across the surface due to the force she exerted. She always hit herself, but she was exposed unwittingly wherever she went. After a while, Jianxing responded with a somewhat dry hum. Upon hearing Jianxing's reply, Zhang Bishan smiled vaguely without commenting further. He only expressed surprise when he saw Jianxing taking out 1984 from her bag and remarked, "You finished it?" The surprise was incredibly evident in his tone. Jianxing gave him a bewildered glance. "What's wrong?" "No, you finished this book in a week?" Jianxing glanced at the thickness of the book and roughly figured out what he meant, but outsiders wouldn't know her purpose and intention for reading the book. So, she simply responded nonchalantly, "It was a bit long." "Not just long, many teachers have read it several times and..." Jianxing looked over upon hearing this. Zhang Bishan saw the clarity and peace in her eyes. But in addition, he also noticed the red veins in her eyes and the faint blue bags under her eyes. Zhang Bishan paused and changed the topic. "They still want to read it several times over. It must be quite interesting." "I don't know, I didn't understand." She was already quite satisfied that she could touch every trace left by Xu Zhengqing. "Is that so?" Jianxing responded as she also checked off 1984 in the register. Then she added, "Thank you." After she finished speaking, she turned to leave. Zhang Bishan watched her somewhat thin figure. "Hey," Jianxing turned her head. Zhang Bishan suddenly asked, "Do you like cats?" Jianxing was startled. She seemed unable to react. "What?" "Seems like you don't hate them," Zhang Bishan said as he turned around and walked back into the counter. He bent over and somehow found a bag of cat food. Without coming back out, he handed it over the counter to Jianxing and said, "You don't have to rush to class right now, right? Can you help feed a cat?" When Jianxing left the bookstore, she was still confused. She took a few steps, stopped, looked at the cat food in her hand, then looked back at the bookstore. The person inside, as if knowing she would look back, waved at her, then made a martial arts-style salute. Jianxing heard his previous words ringing in her ears. "I had a dream last night. A stray cat got pregnant. I fed it, but it didn't like what I gave. It said its babies prefer girls. Can you help?" Obviously, he's making stuff up. But looking at the half-empty bag of cat food, Jianxing guessed he must often feed cats. She didn't know whether the cats were pregnant or disliked him, but his laziness to feed them today seemed genuine. Anyway, she didn't have anything else to do, and she was also curious about the stray cats in the school, so she decided to take a stroll. It was not quite 6 o'clock, and there were occasionally people passing by the teaching building, but the place where cats needed feeding was deserted. This area was dedicated to 2 rows of small tiled houses for students retaking the year, who usually went to morning study at 5:30, and there was no one around at this time. Jianxing hadn't moved a few steps when she heard a heavy chorus of study noises, low and steady. Unlike the aggressive study style of their class, or the fragmented style of second-year high school, and it wasn't like the upcoming third-year senior high school either. This was a kind of heavy chanting that belonged exclusively to the 4th year. Jianxing listened for a while before moving closer. She looked around roughly and didn't see any cats, but she did see several small bowls filled with cat food, as if someone had just refilled them. Jianxing paused, wondering if she had been tricked. Was she that close with him? Why would he trick her? Jianxing was a bit angry. She turned around to leave, but suddenly caught a faint sound of a cat's meow amongst the low hum of study. She paused, subconsciously stopping, worrying she might have heard it wrong. When the second meow sounded, Jianxing then confirmed that there was indeed a cat. She bent down slightly, her steps becoming cautious, following the sound of the meow until the meowing became clearer. As she rounded the corner of the tiled house, she indeed saw a high tail of a cat. She was somewhat pleased. As she approached, shaking the bag of cat food, she tentatively called out, "Meow." When Jianxing saw the full view of the cat, her joyful expression instantly froze, and the sound in her mouth abruptly stopped. She looked at the sight in front of her. One cat, one person. Her mind went blank. It was indeed Xu Zhengqing. What was he doing here? Next to him was also a bag of cat food. Judging by the packaging, it seemed to be similar to the one in her hand. Jianxing stiffened her neck to look down, realizing that it was not just similar, they were exactly the same. Xu Zhengqing seemingly looked surprised seeing her, first saying, "Jianxing." Then his gaze fell on her hand, curiosity piqued. "You know Zhang Bishan?" Jianxing's initial reaction was, it seemed like this was their third unexpected encounter, and each time he would call out her name first. Her second reaction was to ask Xu Zhengqing back, "Zhang Bishan?" Xu Zhengqing chuckled. "You don't even know him and you are helping him feed cats? You won't even know when he sells you." Saying this, he got up. The nearby cat swung its tail around his calf. Jianxing glanced at his toned calf at the sight of the cat's tail. She only took a brief look, but upon meeting the cat's round eyes, she suddenly felt a rush of heat to her ears, quickly averting her gaze. When she looked up, Jianxing noticed Xu Zhengqing was wearing a white sports suit with the number 9 printed on the front and back. He also had a headband, highlighting his handsome features even more. Perhaps due to the headband, Jianxing suddenly felt that she saw Xu Zhengqing's eyes clearly. It was at this moment, Jianxing suddenly felt the desire to step forward. Of course, she still believed that she did not deserve to stand shoulder to shoulder with him, but the enticing future where she could made her feel that she could endure all the tormenting emotions for this future, including lies and concealment. "Where's Zhang Bishan? Didn't he come?" Xu Zhengqing asked again. Jianxing came back to her senses and asked, "You mean the person behind the bookstore counter?" Xu Zhengqing was taken aback for a moment, as if remembering something, then he chuckled and said, "Yes, that counter staff." For some reason, Jianxing detected a hint of sarcasm in his repetition of those words, which involuntarily made her feel somewhat embarrassed. She didn't want Xu Zhengqing to notice anything, so she avoided his gaze by looking down and lifted the bag of cat food in her hand and said, "He asked me to help." Typical of him, Xu Zhengqing didn't dwell on Zhang Bishan. He too lowered his head and nudged the cat that was about to lie on his shoe. Jianxing saw a gentle smile on the corners of his lips as he lowered his eyes. It seemed to radiate a gentle aura that was almost palpable. Her original intention was to see the cat, but now she couldn't bear to look away. Not until the cat meowed softly did Jianxing finally manage to say, "It really likes you." Xu Zhengqing responded, "It's used to being fed by me." Jianxing followed naturally with, "Do you often come here to feed it?" "Pretty often," said Xu Zhengqing. "When Zhang Bishan was in high school here, he did all the feeding. After he went to university, he handed over the task to me. I came over from the bridge today and forgot that he was back." Not wanting to end the conversation but also not knowing what else to ask, Jianxing could only reply with an "oh," worrying that Xu Zhengqing might find her too cold. She added, "I see." She added the words instinctively, but once the silence fell, Jianxing began to feel jittery, afraid that Xu Zhengqing might catch on to her attempting to make conversation without having a topic. Fortunately, Xu Zhengqing was preoccupied with petting the cat and did not notice any of her emotional changes. Jianxing's heartbeat gradually calmed down, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Her heart seemed to be on a roller coaster, with the only remote control held by Xu Zhengqing. Her heart was hers, and yet it was not.